Welcome to Leadership and People. This is a series that pulls back the curtain on leadership by interviewing CEOs, senior executives, and entrepreneurs who have had large exits. We ask these experts about how they built trusted networks to rapidly grow their companies and what advice they wish they knew if they could do it all again. Today on the show, I've got Joel Clark.
What I like hearing from other people is, other types of people they worked around that, set a good example to them or had an impact on them. And maybe how, my style might have changed because of other people that I worked for.
So in the first episode, we talked about Shark Tank. We talked about growing $100 million a year in business. Talking a little more, going a different direction here on this episode. Can you talk about dealing with isolation and finding a co-founder and what that was like for you and why it was valuable for you?
Yeah, definitely. So when I took Kodiak Cakes over, when I was 23, it was just a little tiny business. I was running it from home, my parents' basement, actually. And it was just me. So I was all alone. And I did that for, almost 7 years. And so I had a job, I'd do during the day, and then I'd go and run Kodiak Cakes at night. And I learned pretty fast that it was pretty tough to be alone. I didn't like being all alone. That was hard for me. And so when I quit my job in 2004 to do Kodiak Cakes full time, my dad joined me to help me out of retirement. So he was 65 at the time, and he and I just started working on it. And we worked together for almost 4 years, like I said before in the first episode. But it was so much fun, and I loved having him there. And we bounced ideas off of each other. And just having someone there to be a partner with was really important for me. So when he retired, when he was 70, this was in about 2008, 2009. That's when I hired Cameron Smith, who is our COO now, and he really became a co-founder for me. And I just felt that that's what I needed. That was my style. I need to have somebody working with me that's partnering with me and helping me make decisions. And some people are fine, are probably okay being more alone and just having people that report to them. But for me, that was something that I really needed. And also just having great relationships here at work, that really helps, and it's motivating for me.
That's great. When you think about this idea of connection and human connection, my guess is, it's pretty easy to see what an optimistic guy you are comes across. When you think about making that contagious across an organization, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's important. There's a couple things that I do. One of them is I really do try to deliberately surround myself with optimistic people, because I feed off of that, right? As people, we can feed off of each other's emotions and personalities. And I really like being around optimistic people. So, Cameron, for example, he's our COO I mentioned, but man, he's one of the most optimistic people that I know. And so he's had a huge impact on just the way I am and motivating me and helping me to be optimistic and to stay super motivated. And so I think that's good. But then also you just have to be careful about being negative. You just have to be really, really careful, because people will take that and they'll run with that, And so we have to just stay positive, stay optimistic, and not let the issues that come, we can't let them bog us down, and we cannot act like it's the end of the world when little things come up. That I think can do a lot of damage. And so staying positive, staying optimistic is crucial.
So what about, you've got a growing organization. What about when you have a team member that needs some correction, somebody who isn't living that way, and you realize this isn't a little thing, this is, we probably need a real talk about it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about how you approach what's, a conversation that a lot of managers and leaders prefer to avoid?
Absolutely. Honestly, Jess, early on, I was bad at this. I really was not very good at it. And it was hard for me to approach and have a candid conversation and give direct feedback. It was harder. And so, I kind of felt like I just want to lead through example and just, they'll get it. They'll come along, and that can happen when you're 5 people. People do, they kind of come along and they see how you're working, and it sort of happens. Culture sort of happens. But as we grew, We, number one, felt the need. We realized we need to establish our culture, write it down, and then what we started to do is we started to hold each other accountable for our culture. And so it's now like 25% of our bonus is living our culture, living our values, and our we call it the Kodiak code. So if someone is not living it or they're doing something wrong or whatever, we now have really honest, open conversations with people. And that became part of our culture, was to have candid feedback. But the way we do it is always respectful. And so that became a big part of the culture too, is that yes, we need to be great to work with. We need to work well with each other, but we also need to have candid feedback and let each other know when we're needing to improve something. But it always has to be done with respect and with high EQ, and then you can handle those things, and then people appreciate the feedback.
Well, you're helping them make sure they get their bonus at the end of the year, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
But it's not the easiest thing, right? If we're frustrated enough with someone that we need to have a talk with them, are there things you tell yourself? Is there any tricks or ideas for the rest of us who, it's finally gotten to the point we're ready to talk to somebody about something, and we know that we need to get in that good place so that we can come into that conversation with respect?
Yep, a couple of things I do that I will make myself some notes. I'll write it down. I'll talk about that. I'll think through the things that I need to mention, and then you just do it. You just start. You just have the conversation, and it gets easier the more of them you have. But there is one strategy I think that helps a lot with making the conversation easier to have in the beginning, which is to set the expectation up front that you're going to give honest, open feedback. So we have, one of our leaders here. Her name's Darla. She's our VP of sales, and she's really good at this. And she tells people from the beginning, she's like, "Hey, I'm always going to tell you if there's anything that I see that you need to change, or I'm always going to help you. I'm going to coach you along." And so people know from the beginning that she's going to talk to them. She's going to give them feedback, and it's okay because it's like established. That's how it's going to be. And so when people come in and get hired here at Kodiak Cakes, we tell them from the beginning, "Hey, we're going to give you open feedback. And we're going to ask for it too. We want it back. It's going to be two ways. You're going to have a chance to be totally open about how you feel about your boss or how you feel about this or that." And so setting that up from the beginning really helps. And you just tell people, "Hey, I'm going to be talking to you. I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to tell you what I see, what I hear." And they love it and they appreciate it.
So that can be dicey depending on the culture someone else comes from. So it's nice to hear that you're actually living it. But for other folks who feel like, when my boss says that, it sounds more like the New Yorker cartoon where the boss comes in and says, "I want you to tell me exactly what you think of me, even if it costs you your job." Yeah. So like, how do you signal to people that get them to actually believe it's safe enough to actually say what they mean? Because, especially larger organizations, there's a lot of what gets said and then what was actually meant underneath, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's totally true. I think one thing we do is we talk about it enough and we ask for it enough to where people actually become more comfortable. So at first, yeah, you're right. At first, someone probably won't. They're going to be pretty guarded about what they say because they're not really sure. Do they really believe you, right? Do they want to take that risk in case there really could be a repercussion there? But I think over time, the more time you spend with people, and the more you ask for the feedback, and the more you give it, and the more I guess safe they feel, then the more they'll open up, and then that's when you can really make progress with improvements or changes or things that need to happen. And so I think it's just talking about it a lot and actually genuinely wanting feedback and giving it. That helps.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it works. It sounds like people are seeing someone else give that feedback and then not getting fired or not getting dumped on later, right?
Yeah.
And they see that example. So let's go another direction. You've done a lot of PR in your life. What's a question that we haven't asked yet that we should ask or that you want to get asked?
Yeah. I think something that might be kind of interesting is because you come across a lot of different leadership styles, and I think something that's interesting for me is always hearing from what I like hearing from other people is, other types of people they worked around that, set a good example to them or had an impact on them. And, and maybe how, my style might have changed because of other people that I worked for.
Yeah, yeah.
That's, I think is
Let's hear
interesting.
it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had several jobs growing up, and I remember my first job in high school was working for this pizza place, and the guy that I worked for he was just a total jerk. He was just mean. I mean, he really was mean. And one night I almost walked out on him. Like it was just the two of us. He and I were working this busy Friday night at this little pizza place, and he was just kind of yelling at me and just being rude. And I was working my butt off, man. I was running back and forth, cleaning up tables, serving tables, doing dishes. I was doing everything, and he was cooking. And man, I was a hard worker. And I just remember thinking, I want to leave. I should just leave and just, stiff this guy, leave him out to dry on this busy Friday night. And I didn't, that was it's probably a good move that I didn't, because that would have just been, revenge. That's never good. So I didn't. But what I learned was, you don't really have to be a jerk. You can get a lot more out of people just by being kind and nice and, being open, feedback, telling them what you want. So then later I worked for a guy in Salt Lake, a guy named Clark Lauder, who he sold electrical products. And this guy was awesome. I mean, I loved working for him. This was when I was in college. And he was the opposite. He was a guy that cared about all of us. He cared about us individually and how we were doing, how we were, how our lives were, cared about our work and if we were enjoying our work. And it was such a change for me. It just opened my eyes up to that, hey, you can be a really nice guy and still be a really great leader and a great boss and get really great results. And so, that's we talked earlier in the first episode about relationships, and it motivated me to work hard for this guy. And so I kind of learned, or I kind of thought from that experience, I want to be that type of guy. I'd rather be the type of guy that really,
Yeah,
has good relationships and empowers people and cares about them. So that, that's something that helped me in my life.
can you think of an example? Was it that he took you aside and was interested in what you were interested in, or any instances come to mind that would illustrate the point of the way he led?
Yeah. I mean, I remember one example, he would, and maybe this probably happened quite regularly actually, but I remember one time he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, how are you? How are you doing?" He said, "I know that we've given you a lot of work and you're doing really well." He told me that. He gave me feedback. He said, "You're doing really well and we want to give you more." And he said, "Can you handle it? Are you okay?" Because I was going to college too at the time too. And so, and I just liked that he cared. It wasn't just only about what am I producing? What are my results? And what are the dollars that we're bringing in? He genuinely cared about my workload, if I was enjoying the work, and if it was too much or if it was the right amount. And I mean, that was just one example, but just one of those little things that I appreciated because he was communicating and he cared.
So what was it about the way, because, other leaders could read that script, right? What is it about the way he was asking that you knew it wasn't just like a management trick?
Yeah, gosh, that's a good question. I think it was over time, right? Because over time, he demonstrated over and over that he genuinely cared about me. So little things like, "Hey, Joel, how are you today? How's your college class? How's this? How are your parents?" Little things like that over time. I think that's how you really build it. Because you're right. You could ask that. You could go through that script, but it may not be perceived as being super genuine if you don't have a relationship that's deeper than that. And so I think that's really what it was. And it was also that I saw him care about other people in the company. I was young, but there were these guys that had been working for him for years and years, and they liked their job, and I knew that he really cared about those guys and their families, and that it wasn't just about the boss making a lot of money. It was about everybody in the company. And so I saw those things happen too. And so I kind of picked up on those elements, and that's how I knew that he was genuine.
Yeah. I heard a quote recently. A real friend is someone who asks how things are going and actually listens to the answer.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was like that.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. He actually did care. You're right. Because we can ask, but you can kind of tell when someone's like, I'm asking that because that's what you do, rather than actually caring.
Yeah. So it's great to feel like I like my work, and everybody talks about workplace culture these days.
Hmm.
And then secretly, leaders know, hey, my promotion, my bonus, my stock options, what the board wants from me is we got to post the numbers, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so with you guys having such growth, I mean, you have this workplace we've been talking about, but you also have the growth.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? What would you say or advice you have for folks who are maybe not as happy with their growth that want to kick it into a higher gear like you guys are?
Well, I think one thing, I mean, I really do feel like, again, like you just said, Jess, culture is always talked about, but I really feel like it's the lifeblood of our company, and I feel like it's number one. The numbers have to be number two because they depend on the culture, they depend on the people, so they have to be. So if the numbers are number one, and then you start leading that way and people start to know that all you really care about are the numbers, then I think then the culture gets damaged and people start checking out mentally. Because what we really are trying to do is we're trying to get people to want to be here. We're trying to get people to want to give their best and to give everything they have. And so I think that if culture is truly cared about and focused on as the number one priority, and you really do, you really work hard to build it and manage it, because culture has to be managed. It's always changing. Then I think then you can really start focus. Then you can hit your numbers. Then you can start to figure out what are the weak points, what are the areas where we're strong, and how do we build on those, and what are the things that are making us successful, and how do we build on that. So I mean, that's what I would say. I would say just it really does need to be the number one focus. It just needs to be, even if that sounds cliche, it just has to be. And then then you really can have the ability to drive and hit your numbers because you've got people that want to be there and that will support you with that, with your goals.
Well, and while I'm playing the devil's advocate a bit there,
Hmm.
I think the reason I was pushing you a little bit on it is, for me, it sounds like, and I want you to correct me because I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but it
Yeah.
sounds like a little bit what you're saying is, by people knowing that you care about them first, and
Hmm.
that authenticity is alive and well, then your ability to ask them to bring their A game is not just the boss because he said so because he wants his numbers. Like, it's almost more
Yeah.
like a friend or somebody you like is making the request, and it's less of
Yeah.
a, in addition to the you should. It sounds like there's this whole, because like we started the first episode of, because I like my boss, I'm more
Yeah.
likely to bring that discretionary effort. Is that fair?
Yeah. I would totally agree with that. It's like, I would completely agree. You're there, you start to want the same people that you really have good relationships with. You can align pretty fast, right? So as soon as your boss cares about something, you're gonna care about it too, because you really have a relationship and you care about what he cares about or she cares about. And so I think that is the reason why, and I think what you say is true, and I think that's why. It's because we care about things that we want to care about things that other people care about when we have a great relationship with them.
Yeah. Well, I'll put you on the spot, and if you don't have a story for this, just tell me. But can you think about any time when you did have an instance and it was like somebody screwed up something for the numbers, and you have like this temptation to give them the gears or whatever, and it really comes down to that choice between the numbers and the human, and it was tempting to choose the numbers.
Yeah, I I know we've had situations like that where, and I can't think of one particular instance.
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
That's okay, but I know we've had instances like that where somebody messed something up, and it might have been costly, and then maybe we were tempted to kind of come down hard, but what does that do? I will tell you, an instance comes to mind where that happened to me though. So this boss that I was talking to you about, his name was Clark Louder.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I made a pretty stupid mistake. And I authorized a bunch of product, like several $1,000s worth of product to be shipped out to a building site before the building site was ready to receive it. And so, it was costly because we had to ship the product twice and it never should have gotten out. And, and I remember being really pretty like crap. I really screwed up. And this is going to cost the company a decent amount of money. And I remember thinking to myself, man, Clark has every right to really get on me for this. He really does. He could be so bummed, but he didn't. The way he handled it was awesome. He basically said, it's all right, Joel. We make mistakes. We make mistakes. These things happen. And then we learn from them and we get better. He's like, it's not the end of the world. And I thought it was awesome because then I was like, man, I am going to run through walls for this guy. I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to make it up to him, and I'm going to be better. And so it was actually, he turned it into a really motivating experience for me.
I love that story. My hero, this guy named Terry Warner, he says something like along the lines, I'm going to misquote him, but like, when we point fingers, people's conscience defends them, but when we don't, their conscience convicts them, right? Like, you can think about the leadership thing of like, well, we got to let them know that that's unacceptable. Well, you already knew that was unacceptable, right?
Oh my gosh.
And like, what you told yourself, what's the effect that had on you versus anything he could have said to you, right?
Oh my gosh, totally. He handled that so well, and I got motivated as a result from that. So I did more good in the company over time, just because I cared about him.
Love it. Well, for people that want to try your products, where's the best place for them to connect?
So yeah, you can get Kodiak cakes in most grocery stores. So like Costco, a lot of people like it at Costco. You can get a big box there, and it's a pretty good deal. And then you can get it at most other grocery stores like Smith's and Target, the Harmons if you're in Utah, and it's actually just going out into Walmart stores pretty soon. So
hey,
you can get it
congratulations!
there too. Thanks.
Love it. Well, thanks again for all your stories. This is a great episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet.
Hi, my name is Logan Wilkes and I'm the CEO of Corporate Alliance. A few years ago, I moved to San Diego to build a new market for us there. The biggest deterrent I had to success was I didn't know a soul. I often thought to myself, if I just had a thriving network or influence, this would go 100 times faster. To be honest with you, I had never felt so alone in my life because A, I didn't have an influence, and B, I didn't know anyone that was going through the same thing that I was. If you have ever felt like this and you are looking to grow your influence, join us at one of our upcoming events. You can check us out at corporatealliance.net and request an invite to one of our upcoming experiences.